أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Lesson number 208, Surah Ar-Rum, ayah number 1 to 19. Surah Ar-Rum is a Makki surah, and it was revealed after Surah Al-Inshiqaq. Where is Surah Al-Inshiqaq? In which juz? In the 30th juz. So this surah was revealed after Surah Al-Inshiqaq. And this surah is a very short surah, and it has only 60 verses. At the end of the previous surah, Surah Al-Ankabut, we learned, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. That those people who strive in our way, in us, then we will guide them to our ways as well. And if you notice, it hasn't been said fi sabilina. What has been said? Fina. That a person who strives in order to gain the pleasure of Allah, he's striving, he's putting in effort, he's suffering from difficulties, he doesn't give up, he doesn't quit, he holds on, he keeps going, he keeps striving. Why? To get the pleasure of Allah. Then what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows him the way as well. He shows him that which he does not show to others. You understand? Meaning, the person who strives in order to gain the pleasure of Allah, he will be shown such ways which other people cannot see. He will be shown such opportunities which other people will not see. He will be given so many opportunities, so many ways, he will be able to take advantage of them which other people may not be able to take advantage of. Why? Because he is interested. He wants to gain the pleasure of Allah. It's just like you ask someone to go get something for you from the next room. They go and they come back and they say, oh, I didn't find it. And you go and you find it. What's the difference? What's the difference? You know it. You really want to get it. The other person is not that interested. They consider that going to the next room as a chore, which is why they will go look carelessly here and there and they'll come back telling you, I didn't see it. There's a difference, right? So the person who wants the pleasure of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows him the way. And in this surah, right at the beginning of the surah, we are told about a prediction, a prophecy. Something that was going to happen very soon after these ayat were revealed. And in this is a very subtle, a very deep connection, that a believer, whenever he's going through difficulties, he doesn't give up. He relies on Allah, he holds on to Allah, and while other people see all the doors as closed, he sees doors opened. Where other people see complete darkness in front of them, the one who strives in order to gain the pleasure of Allah, what happens to him? He sees light. In the beginning of the surah, we will learn about how the Romans were defeated, and the mushrikeen of Makkah, they said to the Muslims that we will defeat you just like the Romans were defeated. So at such a time, you may feel, okay, no options left, no hope left, no light at all. But the one who relies on Allah and who keeps striving, what happens? لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah shows him the way. Allah gives him hope. He can still see light. He can still see hope. He does not give up. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif, Lam, Mim. Huruf muqatta'at. These huruf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best about their exact meaning, about their exact significance. However, as many scholars have said, that these huruf definitely, they tell us about the miraculous nature of the Qur'an. That's what they demonstrate. That these huruf are huruf that are well known to you. You use them all the time to make up your words and sentences. But you cannot produce anything like this Qur'an. And as you know that after these huruf, always there is something that is mentioned about the Qur'an. In the previous surah, what did we learn? The consequence of believing in the Qur'an. And over here, what do we learn? About a prophecy, a prediction, which in itself shows that the Qur'an is a miracle. غُلِبَتِ الرُّومِ. The Romans have been conquered. The Romans have been defeated. غُلِبَت. From the root letters, غَيْن, لام, ba. And غَلْبَة or غَلَبَة means to overpower the other, to defeat the other. So, غُلِبَت, it was overpowered, it was defeated, it was overcome. Who? Ar-Rumu, the Rum, meaning the Romans. By who? By the Persians. Ar-Rum refers to the Roman people, the Roman Empire, the Roman armies, the Ahlul Rum, the people who used to live in Rome at the time. And remember that those people, they were Christians. So who were they? Ahlul Kitab. And they had been defeated by the Persians. And who were Persians? They were fire worshippers, Zoroastrians, Mushrikeen. Now the Romans, they are a nation, a people, who were the descendants of Rum bin Ais bin Ishaq bin Ibrahim. So what does it show to us? They were descendants of who? Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Ar-Rum is actually the name of a person who was the predecessor of the Romans. And the people of Rum, as well as the area where they used to live, both of them came to be known as Ar-Rum. Just as the people of Saba, what do we know about them? The area where they used to live, as well as the nation themselves. What are they known as? Saba. Similarly, the people of Madian, the place they lived and the name of the people, both are known as Madian. So the same case is with Ar-Rum. Now, these people, they were a Christian nation and mainly Eastern Orthodox Church. And over here, Ar-Rum refers to not the entire Roman Empire, but rather it refers to the ancient Roman Empire, which was the eastern part of the Byzantine Empire. Because Byzantine Empire and the Roman Empire both are used interchangeably. Isn't it so? So, Ar-Rum refers to mainly the eastern part of the Byzantine Empire that had separated from the main empire in 395 AD. It had separated from the main empire in which time? 395 AD. And it includes the area of Syria, Palestine, and Central Asia. So what area are we talking about? Present day, Syria, Palestine, and Central Asia. And in the 15th century, this area, it fell into the hands of who? Of the Muslims. The Muslims conquered this area. At the hands of who? Sultan Muhammad Fatih. So, غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم, the Romans have been defeated. Over here, reference is to the defeat of Romans at the hands of Persians. And this was 6 or 7 years before the Hijrah. When was this? 6 to 7 years before Hijrah. And where were they defeated? In which area in particular? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِي أَدْنَى الْأَرْضِ, in the nearest land. Nearest land to who? To Arabia, to Mecca. Meaning that part of the Roman Empire which was not too far from Mecca. You understand? Because the empire itself was huge. We're talking about Asia, we're talking about Palestine, about Syria. It's a huge area. So, where exactly were they defeated? Which part? The part that was Adna al-Ard, closest part to Mecca. Adna, from the root letters Dal, Nun, Waw, Dunuf, to be close, to be low. And over here, Adna, meaning closer, closest, very near. Wahum, and they, min ba'di ghalabihim, after their defeat, sayaglibun, soon they will overpower. Ghalabi. Over here, ghalaba, ghalabihim, what does it refer to? Their defeat, their being overcome. Very soon after that, what's going to happen? Sayaglibun. They will overpower. They will overpower who? The Persians. Right now they have been defeated, but very soon what's going to happen? They will overpower their enemy. They will regain their victory. Remember that at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were two great empires. And which ones were they? The Persian, and secondly, the Roman Empire. And the Romans, who were they? They were Christians, so they were Ahlul Kitab. And the Persians, as I mentioned to you earlier, who were they? Zoroastrians, they were Mushrikeen. And these two nations, because they were extremely mighty, and they were right next to each other, there was always conflict between the two. You understand? Because they were right next to each other, and they were also extremely powerful. As a result, what happened? There were always conflicts between the two. At one time, one would attack the other, invade the other, and overpower the other. And at another time, what would happen? They would attack the other, and they would overpower them. So this back and forth was constantly a part of Roman and Persian history. This always was there. And we see that after the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, in the year 603, the Persians, they attacked the Romans. Because the Romans at that time, they had become extremely weak. So the Persians, what did they do? They attacked the Roman Empire. And within a few years, by the year 616, they managed to conquer the entire Roman Empire. And they took their control over even Jerusalem. Now you can imagine, Romans were who? Christians. And for them, what was the Holy Land? Jerusalem. And that fell into the hands of the Persians. So just imagine. The Romans, they were completely defeated. Now, the Muslims, in their belief, who were they closer to? The Romans. And the Mushrikeen, who were they closer to in their beliefs? The Persians. And this is why, naturally, the Muslims, who did they sympathize with? The Romans. Alright, the Christians. And the Mushrikeen, they would sympathize with the Persians. Just as even today, if there's a cricket match between India and England, what happens? People say, oh, side with the Ahlul Kitab, not with the Mushrikeen. People say that a lot. I mean, it has nothing to do with politics, nothing whatsoever, but what happens? You naturally tend to have sympathy with who? The one who is closer to you in faith. Isn't it so? And the one who is more distant to you, even if there's nothing between you and them, what happens? You have no interest in them. And also Muslims had more sympathy with the Romans. Why? Because around this time, some of the Muslims had migrated to Abyssinia. And a Christian king had given his help, had offered his help to the Muslims. So you can imagine, naturally, the Muslims sympathized with the Romans, and the Mushrikeen, they sympathized with the Persians. And when this defeat happened, when this battle happened, and Jerusalem, it fell into the hands of the Persians, the Romans were completely defeated. The Muslims, you can imagine how sad they must have been. You can imagine how upset they must have been, how grief-stricken they must have been. And the situation in Makkah was not any better. Because the Muslims were weak before who? Before the Mushrikeen. And on the other hand, the Romans, who were closer to Muslims in their belief, even they had been defeated by the Mushrikeen. Now the Mushrikeen, they became extremely arrogant at this point, and they began saying to the Muslims in Makkah that just as the Romans were defeated, we too are going to defeat you one day. Just as the Romans were finished, similarly we are also going to finish you one day. Just wait. Just wait for a few more days and see, this religion of yours that you've invented, it's going to come to an end. All of you are going to be silenced. Now this was a great test for the Muslims. You can imagine. It was extremely difficult for them. You may wonder, that battle between Romans and Persians, what did that have to do, anything at all with the Muslims and Makkans? Yes, they weren't a part of it. They didn't gain any benefit. But it has some effect on you. If your country, the country that you belong to, wins something, loses something, don't you rejoice? Don't you become sad? Of course. The Muslims in another land, if they're victorious, don't you become happy? Of course you do. If they suffer, don't you suffer? Of course you do. So, although you are not actively participating with them, but definitely their defeat, their victory impacts you. And the Muslims were also extremely sad because of the same reason. And because it gave an opportunity to the Mushrikeen to rejoice at them. So you can imagine, at this time, in this state, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed these ayat. That غُلِبَتِ الرُّومِ فِي أَدْنَى الْأَرْضِ وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ سَيَغْلِبُونَ. Now this was a prophecy, this was a prediction. And this gave a lot of hope to the Muslims. This gave a lot of hope to the Muslims. So at that time of sadness and despair, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them good news. That it seems impossible that Romans will ever regain their victory. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them victory. And in this was also a subtle message for the Muslims. What was that? That yes, you are weak now. Yes, you are defeated now at the hands of your enemy. But this is just a matter of a few years. Very soon, Allah will also aid you. And we see that this prophecy, it did come to pass. It was fulfilled, as we will learn in the following ayah. And this was an evidence of the truthfulness of the Quran and also the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ. Because this actually happened. Very soon after the defeat, major changes occurred in the Eastern Roman Empire. And in the year 623, the Romans, they attacked the Persians, and in the year 624, they gained a decisive victory. So within 1 year, 623 they attacked, in 624 they were victorious. And by 627, the Romans had taken back all of their lands from the Persians. So the tables completely turned. Within a few years, when were they defeated? In which year? 616. And now, in 623, in a matter of 7 years, that's it, the Romans, they gained their victory back over the Persians. And it is said that it was at the same time as the Muslims gained victory at Badr. That just as the Muslims were victorious at the Battle of Badr, what happened? They got the news that the Romans had also gained victory over the Persians. في بضع سنين, in a few years, لله الأمر, to Allah belongs the amr, min qablu, before, wa min ba'd, and also after. وَيَوْمَئِذٍ, and that day, يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the believers will rejoice. في بضع سنين. The word bid'i is used for some, several, few. And in particular, it is used for a number that is between 3 and 9. So we're talking about somewhere between 3 and 9. Some say any number more than 5, and others say any number less than 10. But the stronger opinion is between 3 and 9. So في بضع سنين, in a few years, within 3 to 9 years, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? The Romans, they will يغلبون, over who? Over the Persians. And that's exactly what happened. As I mentioned to you, in 616, they lost, and in 623, they regained their victory. So في بضع سنين, this is going to happen within a few years. لله الأمر, why will this happen? Because to Allah belongs all the command, all of the affairs. The decision of it belongs to who? Lillah. And lam over here is for hasl, meaning only to Him. And al-amr over here, this al is of istighraq. What does it mean? Entirely all of the command. Every command, whether it is kauni or it is shar'i. Whether it has to do with the universe or it has to do with the religious laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given. Who has the authority to decide and implement? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, this loss happened, this victory happened, this defeat happened, but at whose command? At whose permission? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because all of the command, it belongs to who exclusively? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Min qablu, before. Before what? Before the defeat of the Romans. Wa min ba'du, and also after the defeat of the Romans. Min qablu, before the defeat of the Romans, and wa min ba'd, after the defeat of the Romans, or after the victory of the Romans. So in every situation, whether someone is losing or someone is victorious, someone is being defeated, someone is gaining victory, who has the authority? Who decides? Who allows that to happen? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because generally what happens? When it comes to the deen, when it comes to something that happens with the Muslims only, we think, oh, this has happened by the permission of Allah. But what does it show to us? Anything that happens in this dunya, whether it is with Muslims or with non-Muslims, with Ahlul Kitab or the Mushrikeen, whether it is something that has to do with politics or with anything else, who has the authority? By whose permission everything happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِلَّهِ الْأَمْرُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَمِنْ بَعْدُ وَيَوْمَئِذٍ, and on that day. Which day? On the day that you will see the Romans victorious over the Persians. يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the believers will be very happy. يَفْرَحُ, farh. They'll be excited, they'll be happy, they will rejoice. Why will they rejoice? Why? Because first of all, the Romans have been victorious. The prediction, the promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made, that has been fulfilled. This is an evidence of the truthfulness of the Qur'an. So you can imagine how happy the Muslims would be. Because a few years ago, when it seemed impossible for the Romans to be victorious, there the ayat are being revealed, the Romans are going to regain their victory. Just imagine. Imagine if we were told something like that. We'd be a bit doubtful. And imagine if that is fulfilled, how happy you would be. When you say that something's going to happen and after some time it does happen, aren't you happy? Aren't you excited? So similarly, وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. And why else will the Muslims be happy? Because on that day they will also be victorious over their enemy. At the battle of Badr, when they will be victorious and their enemy will be defeated. Now we see that in Makkah, there seemed to be absolutely no sign of the present situation changing at all. Because the Muslims were constantly suffering. Each day the persecution was increasing. If you look at the Meccan era, at the beginning the persecution was there, however it was less. But as time went by, the persecution only increased. To the point that when the Prophet ﷺ left Makkah, his life was in danger. Isn't it? So, in Makkah, there seemed to be no hope that the situation would ever change. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that this situation will change, it seemed far from reality. It seemed extremely difficult to believe because each day the persecution was only increasing. But what do we learn from these ayat? That no matter what situation a person may be in, how should he be? He should be hopeful. He should never ever despair of Allah's mercy. And if Allah has made a promise, he should believe in it with conviction. In the previous surah, what did we learn? That when a person will accept Iman, when a person will become serious about his Islam, when he will try to implement the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachings of the Quran, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? He will face difficulties. He will face challenges. Sometimes from who? From his own family. Sometimes from his own friends. In different ways. But what do we see? That no matter what situation a person may be in, he should never ever give up hope. If somebody does not allow you to do something, when you want to do it, don't think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do it. Don't think like that. Don't look at them. Look at the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to be hopeful. You have to think positive. Because the moment you give up, then what's going to happen? Really, that thing is never going to happen. Because you stop striving for it. You stop praying for it. And if you stay hopeful, you remain positive, what's going to happen? You're going to find a way of doing it. As we learned, that وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah will show them the way. And if a person says, oh, this is not meant for me, I'm never going to be able to do it, this is impossible, my family does not cooperate, then really, that person will not be able to do it. Just the other day, somebody was mentioning to me about how, when they learned about the importance of, covering properly and wearing the jilbab, she wanted to do it. But her husband said, no way, you can never do it. You're not allowed to do it. And she said that every time she'd put it on, to go out somewhere, her husband would sit down. That I'm not going until you take this off. If you were in this situation, what would you do? Fine, I accept it. Maybe I'm not meant to do it. Right? If you were in this situation, just imagine what would you do? You'd give up, right? After some time, you'd stop trying. But this sister, she was telling me that one day she just came home and told her husband, I'm going to wear it. Please let me wear it. He was silent. The next day they had to go somewhere, she wore it. He said, you're going to wear it? She said, yes, I am going to wear it. I'm not taking it off. And she kept it on. He was upset. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And then after that, he's looking for a bios for her. Imagine. This is just a test. This is just a test. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us, that how strong are we? How determined are we? And if at the time of opposition we think, oh, I'm not meant to do it, this is not for me, just accept. Then really when you give up hope, then how will you find a way? You will not find a way. So at a time when you see no light, no hope, stay hopeful, be hopeful, and rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Those who are patient and they rely on their Lord. That yes, the situation is extremely difficult. It seems impossible. But my Lord will not abandon me. He will not leave me. I have to keep trying. I have to become firm. And I have to be positive. And as long as you're like that, Allah will also send you His aid. Whenever a person faces any difficulty, what do we learn? That on one hand, he should be patient in bearing that difficulty. And on the other, he should rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And relying upon Allah means that you don't give up hope. Relying on Allah means that, Ya Allah, you make the way for me. You make it possible for me. I am weak, I am unable, but you allow me. You make the ways for me. And when a person relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like this, then definitely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help him. And we see over here that the Romans, they were defeated, and after some time, they regained their victory. Right? The Muslims in Makkah, they were so weak, but after some time, they were victorious. What do we see? That no situation remains permanent. No situation, no circumstance remains permanent. If somebody does not cooperate with you today, just stay silent, keep praying to Allah, and they will cooperate with you tomorrow. You don't have to give up hope. The only thing that is constant in life is what? Change. Every single day we see this happening. The day changes into the night. The night changes into the day. Every single day we see this. We see a child one day, we see them after a week, we're like, oh my God, they've changed so much. We meet someone one day, we meet them after 2 weeks, and we say, oh, you've changed. You look different. You look tired, or you look rested. Isn't it? We always say these things whenever we see someone after a long period of time. So we see that nothing remains the same. So why should we ever think that if the situation has become difficult for us, it will forever remain difficult? It will not forever remain difficult. It will become easy. But when? When you don't give up and you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you believe in the promises of Allah. We learn in Surah Ar-Rum, ayah 140, that وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. And these days, we alternate between the people. Meaning that one day, one has authority, and the other day, the other person has authority. One day, one person is defeated, and tomorrow, he is victorious. So just because you have the upper hand today, doesn't mean you will remain like this forever. So don't become too proud. And if you are weak today, don't think you will forever remain weak. So don't despair of Allah's mercy. Don't despair of Allah's help and support. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Today one has victory, tomorrow the other will have victory. And this success and loss in the dunya is what? Is a test. That what do you do when things are good? And what do you do when circumstances are difficult? Do you turn to Allah? Do you give up hope? Are you patient? Are you positive? Are you confident? Are you sad? Are you angry? How do you behave? This is basically what the test is about. That what do you do? Does your iman increase? Does it decrease? Does your dua increase? Or does it decrease? What happens? What do you do?
Assalamu alaikum. I was listening to the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ this weekend, and during the boycott, the companions, they went through this severe test of hunger. And nobody complained. Nobody complained whatsoever. I was listening that one of the companions, he found something near his foot that was soft and moist. He picked it up. It was dark. He ate it. And he didn't know ever. He didn't find out ever what it was. And for 3 days, he didn't eat anything after that. That was his only food. They would eat leaves. They would eat, they didn't have anything at all. And I was thinking, subhanAllah, just 5 minutes ago, we had a test of heat. Whether we could stay in this room or not without the AC. And I saw everybody's face and I thought, oh man, what are people thinking right now? What are they going to do? How many complaints are we going to get? There's no AC, SubhanAllah, such a small test. They went through it for so many months. We only have to go through something like this for 1 day. Just think about it. How much do they strive? And there was non-Muslims there as well. Not just Muslims, non-Muslims as well. And they went through so much. And after that, the Prophet ﷺ, he continued his work. Regardless, all of this, he continued his work. Within that time, his wife died. After that, he went to Taif. He did not stop. He didn't say, I'm too hungry, forget this. Or it's too hot, I can't do this.
See, one is that a person just gets lost in the problem that he's suffering from. And he's only concerned about it. I'm hungry, I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. And when a person is only concerned about that problem is on his head, really he cannot do anything else. Isn't it so? Isn't it so? That when you're telling yourself, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, can you really do anything? You can't. But if you tell yourself, yes, I'm hungry, however, this needs to get done, you do your work anyway. Just as we've been learning, the person who is focused, the person who has a purpose in life, then no matter what happens in life, he remains focused. The ups and downs, they come and they go, but nothing distracts him from his purpose. So one is that, it's hot in the classroom and we think, oh my God, is it going to be like this for the rest of the day? I'm going to sleep in the class. But the other is okay. Whether it's hot or cold, I'm in class, I have to focus, I have to do my work. And you do it. And you know what's going to happen after some time? You'll forget the heat. Honestly, you will. But if you keep telling yourself, it's so hot, it's so humid, it's so smelly, then what's going to happen? You will not be able to do any work. But if you focus on your work, it'll make you overcome your circumstances. So what's the lesson then from these ayat? That no matter what situation a person may be in, he should not give up hope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He should not think that the situation will never change. No, he should remain positive. He should have tawakkul on Allah. He should do sabr. He should increase in his dua. And very soon the situation will change. That sometimes it happens that other people, they discourage you. That why, it's so difficult for you. You're going through so much difficulty. Why are you doing this? Take it easy on yourself. But we see that if a person has trust on Allah, then he will not give much importance to what other people are saying to him. بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ, by the help of Allah, with the help of Allah. What does it mean by this? That the Ahlul Kitab, meaning the Romans, they will يَغْلِبُونَ, they will overpower the Persians. How? By the help of Allah. Or, the previous ayah ends with, وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. That day the believers will rejoice. Why? بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ, in the victory of Allah. In the victory that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted to them. So how do we understand بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ? That first of all, the Romans will conquer the Persians. How? With the help of Allah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid them against their enemy. And they will be victorious. And secondly, that the believers, they will rejoice that day, بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ, in the victory of Allah, meaning in the victory that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them at the battle of Badr. يَنْصُرُ مَن يَشَاءُ, Allah helps whomsoever He wills. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ, and He is the mighty, and He is the especially merciful. He is mighty, meaning He is all able to seize the wrongdoers, and He is merciful, that He helps whomever He wills. He is Al-Aziz, and He is also Ar-Rahim. If you look at it, the believers at the Battle of Badr, how many were they? 313. And the mushrikeen, 3 times their number. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped them. On the other hand, we see that the Romans, they had been completely defeated by the Persians. To the point that even Jerusalem was under the control of the Persians. But what happened? The situation completely changed. But how? بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. This is what a person should have hope of. That if I keep doing what I'm supposed to do, Allah will also help me. I cannot accomplish this myself. No, Allah will give me the strength. He will provide the opportunity to me. He will make the way for me. And a person must have this conviction that وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ, that for Allah, nothing is difficult. He is Al-Aziz and He is Ar-Rahim. Al-Aziz, from the root letters, Ain, Zai, Zai. The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Aziz, what does it mean? The Almighty. But remember that it's from the word Izzah. Aziz is basically Zul Izzah, the possessor of Izzah. And what does Izzah mean? Izzah with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is of 3 types. First of all, Izzatul Qadr. That He is the possessor of Izzatul Qadr. And what does it mean by Izzatul Qadr? Meaning the one who is respected, the one who is dear, the one who is beloved, the one who is distinguished. So He is not like anyone else, but rather He is Al-Aziz. He is distinguished. He is respected. Secondly, Al-Aziz means Zu Izzatul Qahr. Meaning, the one who is a possessor of Izzatul Qahr. And what does Qahr mean? Dominance, authority over the other, Quwwah, to have power over the other, to have complete control, to overpower. And remember that this does not necessarily give the meaning of aggressiveness. Because sometimes when we think of someone who is mighty and powerful, what do we think? They're very aggressive. No, this is not what this word means necessarily. What it means is that one who is completely powerful, completely capable, he is completely strong, he is all able, he is mighty, that he can accomplish anything that he wants to. Nothing at all is difficult for him. Nothing at all is challenging for him. So he is Al-Aziz. And thirdly, the third type of izzah is Izzatul Imtina'. Alif, Mim, Ta, Nun, Alif, Ain. Imtina'. And what does imtina' mean? Ghalbah, meaning the power to prevent. It's from man'. What does man' mean? To stop. So imtina' is to have the power to prevent. So what does it mean by that? Meaning one who is so powerful that everyone else before him is powerless. No one can harm him in any way. He has complete power and authority to prevent any harm from reaching him. You understand? Any harm at all. So if Allah has said that the Romans will be victorious, then what will happen? They will definitely be victorious. The Persians, no matter what they do, they cannot change this word of Allah. Because Allah, He is Al-Aziz. وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. And Ar-Rahim, what meaning does it give as opposed to Ar-Rahman? That the one who is especially merciful towards who? Towards the believers. And Ar-Rahim also gives the meaning of the act of showing mercy. Where Ar-Rahman gives the meaning of the sifa of Rahmah, Ar-Rahim gives the meaning of the act of showing mercy. So Ar-Rahim is the one who shows mercy. Ar-Rahman is Dhu Rahmatan Wasi'ah, the possessor of wasi' mercy. But Ar-Rahim is the one who shows mercy. So وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. So He is completely capable of granting victory, of helping His servants, of changing the situation, completely capable, that no one at all can change His plan. Everything is powerless before Him. And changing the situation is not at all difficult for Him. We might think, oh my God, this is so difficult. How is it possible? How is it possible? But for Allah, everything is possible. It's not difficult at all. And He is Ar-Rahim. Wa'ad Allah, promise of Allah. What is the promise of Allah? Of this victory, of help. Which victory? Which help? That was granted to the Romans and also which will be granted to the Muslims. Wa'ad Allah. La yukhlif Allahu wa'dahu. And Allah, He does not go against His promise. Yukhlifu. Kha, lam, fa. Khalf. Khalf literally means to go back, to go behind. And akhlafa yukhlifu is to go back on one's word. That a person said he will do something, but he goes back on his promise. He goes back on his word, meaning he doesn't do it. He breaks his promise. So Allah, la yukhlifu Allahu wa'dahu. He does not go against His promise. Meaning any promise that Allah has made, any promise at all, He does not break it. He always, always fulfills it. In Surah Qaf, ayah 29, we learn, مَا يُبَدَّلُ الْقَوْلُ لَدَيَّ. The word will not be changed with me. The word, the promise that Allah has made, it is not changed. It is not altered. Allah fulfilled His promise. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most people, they do not know. What do they not know? That Allah fulfilled His promises. That His promise is true. He will fulfill it. He will never ever go against it. So what do we see over here? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised His help to who? الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. He has promised His help to such people. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And indeed Allah, His help is with those who do ihsan. This is a promise of Allah. But what happens? Most people, they do not believe in this promise with conviction. Because if they believed with conviction, then what would happen? They would never give up. They would never give up hope. They would always remain positive. They would be strong. They would continue, no matter how difficult the situation might become. Because they know that Allah has promised His help. And if a person believes, that for his efforts, there is reward, inshaAllah. If a person believes in this promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well, then what will happen? He will continue. He will never give up. He will never become lazy. But we see that most people, they don't realize this promise. لا يعلمون ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. The majority of the people, they do not know about this. Which is why, after some time, they give up. After some time, they become negative. After some time, they think it's impossible. Maybe that promise was not meant for me. Maybe it's just for someone else. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But why is it so? Why do most people not know? Why do they not realize this? That Allah's promises are true? Because the way that Allah fulfills His promises is very subtle. That people don't even realize. The way that Allah fulfills His promises is extremely subtle. That people don't even realize. If you look at how the day turns into the night, it's so subtle. Such a huge change, but it's so subtle. Similarly, the way life turns to death. Such a huge change, but it's so subtle. So this is why many people, they do not realize. Because the way that Allah does things many times is subtle. And why is it that people don't understand this? Because يَعْلَمُونَ الظَّاهِرَ مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. They know only that which is apparent of this worldly life. يَعْلَمُونَ عين لام ميم علم. They know only the zahir min al-hayat ad-dunya, of the life of this world. This is why they don't believe in the promises of Allah. This is why they don't have conviction in the promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made. Because they only know the apparent matters of this worldly life. وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. And they are completely heedless and unaware of the hereafter. Because if they had yaqeen in the hereafter, then what would happen? They would have yaqeen in the promises of Allah. But because they're completely unaware of the hereafter, they only know the superficial of this dunya. This is why they don't believe in the promises of Allah with conviction. يَعْلَمُونَ from ilm. Remember that ilm is of two types. Over here, what do we learn? يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا. Ilm is of two types. One type of ilm is zahiri. The one that is being mentioned over here. What does it mean by zahir? What is zahir? One that is apparent. One that is obvious. One that is visible. One that is on the surface. So, the zahiri ilm of something is to just know the apparent aspect of something. But that's it. Like for example, you see a book. What is zahiri ilm? This is just a book. You don't know what the name of the book is. You don't know who the author is. You don't know what the book talks about. You don't know who the book belongs to. You have no idea about all of this. What do you know? This is just a book. This is what? Zahiri ilm. To know about the apparent aspect of something only. This is one type of knowledge. The other type of knowledge is haqiqi ilm. The knowledge of the reality of something. What does it mean by that? It means to know the inner aspect of something. To know the beginning of something, the end of something. To know the purpose of something. And this is ilm tam. This is complete knowledge. Taking the same example of the book. One is that a person says, oh, it's a book. And the other is that a person looks at the book and he recognizes what kind of a book it is. Whether it's a book of science, it's a book of self-help, it's a book of, whatever, cooking, anything. He reads the title, and from that he can figure out. He reads the name of the publisher, and from that he can figure out. So, this is haqiqi ilm. To know about the reality of something, the inner aspect of something, the depth of something, the beginning of something, the end of something, the purpose of something, the function of something. Now, the majority of the people, what do they know? What kind of knowledge do they have? يَعْلَمُونَ الظَّاهِرَ مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Just the apparent things. Oh, so-and-so won, or so-and-so lost. How did they win? Why did they win? What happened? Why did they lose? How did they lose? What happened? No idea. All they know is, so-and-so won, so-and-so lost, and khalas, that's it. This is what? Zahir. Now most people, they only know the zahir ilm of what? Al-hayat ad-dunya. Of the life of this dunya. Which is ilmun naqis, which is incomplete, deficient knowledge. It's not kamil. They just know that we're living, but they don't know about their beginning. They don't know about their end. They don't know about their purpose. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. They only know the apparent part of the dunya. How to make money, how to dress up, how to travel, where to go, where to invest. You understand? What to study. This is all the apparent aspect of this dunya. They know a lot about that. But when it comes to the akhirah, they're completely ghafil. They're completely la ilm. They're completely unaware. And this is a state of who? This is a state of who? The majority of the people. If you think about it, these days, anything of this dunya, there's an expert of that science, of that field. Isn't it? From wearing makeup, to designing your house, to, matching the colors, and so on and so forth, to wearing the clothes. There's an expert of every single field. Right? If you want to start a business, if you want to start an online business, if you want to start any kind of business, you have experts of those fields. And anytime if you want to start something, what do? You go to the experts. You hire a consultant. And what do? They guide you. They tell you, do this, don't do this. Invest here, don't invest here. Put in at least this much money, don't put in this much money. Don't waste your money on this. Isn't it? So, great experts. But if you think about it, if you analyze their situation, their knowledge is limited to what? Only this dunya. And only the zahir aspects of this dunya. They don't look at that, okay, is it really going to be beneficial for you for the akhirah or not? Like, for example, if you want to invest somewhere, you go ask an expert, they will tell you, these days you should invest in this. Why? Because this is a new business coming up. This is a new interest that people have. And if you invest your money in this, you will gain this much profit. But if you ask, is it halal? Don't know. Is it really going to benefit me in my akhirah? No idea. وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. Completely unaware, completely negligent of the hereafter. And unfortunately, there are many Muslims like this as well. That, for example, if you want to buy a house, sell a house, they will come and give you great advice. Great advice. Don't sell right now. Sell within a month and see the profit that you make. And don't sell your house like this. Make these changes and see you'll get 20% more money. Renovate your house and every dollar you spend, you will get $2 in return. Isn't it? They give you such great advice. You're like, wow, amazing. But at the same time, they're completely ghafil of their akhirah. Completely ghafil. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. And unfortunately, this is the reality of most of the people. Majority of the people. And if you look at it, what is the source of their knowledge? Whatever they know of this dunya, what is the source of that? Observation, study, research, past experience. Isn't it so? Based on that, they have accumulated a lot of information, a lot of understanding, and based on that, they will tell you whatever they tell you. And with regards to this knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah An-Najm, ayah 30, that ذَلِكَ مَبْلَغُهُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ. This is the sum of their knowledge. This is the extent of their knowledge. That's all they know. That's all they know. But there is another source of knowledge. And what is that? Revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now there are many people who know a lot about the dunya. But when it comes to the revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent, what do they know? Hardly anything. They don't know much at all. And despite the fact that they are completely ignorant of the Quran, what do they consider themselves to be? Experts. Extremely knowledgeable. Great academics. People really respect them. They look up to them. But what do we see? That if a person only has knowledge of this dunya, then that knowledge is what? Zahir. It's naqis. It's incomplete. It's deficient. And only when a person has the knowledge of deen, the knowledge of Quran, the knowledge of the akhirah, then his knowledge is worth something. Then it means something. يَعْلَمُونَ الظَّاهِرَ مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. And why is it that the knowledge of the deen is important? Because that is what tells you about your origin and your destination. That is what tells you where you're from, where you're going to, what's your purpose, what's your goal. This is what Qur'an tells you about. And the rest of the knowledge, it will not tell you. No matter how much research you do, no matter how much study you do, you will never find these answers. يَعْلَمُونَ الظَّاهِرَ مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. Now the point of saying this is not to undermine the knowledge of this dunya. No, that knowledge is also important. Why? Because if a person is living in this dunya, he needs to know about that. If you don't know what to eat, if you don't know what's good for you, what's bad for you, what's the nutritional value of something and what is the health benefit of something, there's a difference when you know and when you don't know. Isn't it? So this knowledge is necessary. But remember that the knowledge of this dunya, the zahir knowledge of this dunya, that is what? It brings only temporary benefit. And the knowledge of the akhirah, that is what brings a person eternal benefit. Long-lasting benefit. Never-ending benefit. Okay, we'll listen to the recitation and then we'll continue.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم